a lot of people have gathered here this evening because they've heard a lot about Star Oil. They are inspired by what you've been able to achieve. And this evening, our goal for meeting here is to dive a bit deep into what has led to the results and the outcome that Star Oil has achieved. And you being at the helm of affairs, we want to get a bit into your mind and understand what you've been thinking and what you've been doing. All right. So thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you, Prince. Thank you very much, Prince. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. It's been an interesting journey. I'm looking forward to sharing with you all, and looking forward to the question and answer session, because I think that's where we get to explore more of the key issues. I've already started having some good conversations, so I know where the the conversation is going. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So just to give Philip a background of the SSTN, we're a group of companies and leaders who have gone through the Stanford Seed Transformation Program, made up of a lot of leaders, CEOs, and founders. And I mean, for most of us, the dream is to build and scale our businesses. And you've been able to really do something that is not common. Okay. And I think I met you about 4 years ago. And as soon as I met you, I said, oh, this guy is phenomenal. So, I mean, we built a relationship since then. But this evening, we want to share that experience with our members here. So I'll just go straight to, I mean, you joining Star Oil, because unlike most of the people here, you were not the founder of Star Oil. You came in from PwC, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And I think you were handling the finance role and later was made CEO of the company. So can you just give us a bit of a background of that? Because, and the reason why I'm asking this question is a lot of the leaders struggle to transition or hand over to other people to run their businesses. And a lot of people generally also believe that if they have to hand over, it has to be family. They have to have a son, a daughter, a nephew, a niece, or somebody familiar.
Yeah.
But you came from private sector, from the consulting PwC firm,
Yeah.
and you joined Star Oil. So can you just take us through how you joined Star Oil, just to give us a bit of history?
Okay, thank you very much, Prince. I joined Star Oil in 2014, so it's been, I'm sure, 12 years now. So it's not, it's not as quick as it sounds these days. I was with PwC for 8 years before joining Star Oil. I was recommended by a colleague in the PwC office who had gotten married to the largest shareholder. So Star Oil has about 8 shareholders who are all Ghanaians. They started a business from scratch. Yeah. In 1998. So before I joined Star Oil, the company had already existed for maybe about 16 years. So I joined through a referral from a colleague in the office who had married into the family. And because at the time I was a manager in the PwC office, and I felt that I didn't want to become partner. I wanted to go into the industry and do things myself rather than reviewing and providing advice. So I went to, long story short, I went in there, did a year of just, attending meetings. I was still with PwC, but I would find time and go and sit in their meetings, understand the business and how their challenges, etc. And then eventually in 2014, decided to join as finance director. So I was finance director for 6 years, 2014 to 2020, when I became CEO during the COVID time when every business was struggling. I think at the time, to be honest with you, I was a bit frustrated with the pace of change. So I turned in my resignation because I had my own accounting firm with a few colleagues from PwC on the side. So I felt it was maybe out of frustration. I wanted to go and just focus on that. And during that time, the majority shareholder, I think after reflection and so on, decided that he would rather take his retirement because he was 65 at the time. And he Just to make sure I respond to your question, his elder son is my age. He's an IT guy. I worked with as a colleague in the management team. And just to highlight the point that he decided to hand over the business in terms of making me the CEO rather than his son, um, which is sometimes there's no wrong or correct answer to that. It can just based on competence and who is capable of stepping in at the right time. COVID time presented a lot of challenges. Maybe me being a finance person was a better choice than um, his own son. But that's the decision he took. Um, Between 2020 and 2025, we moved from number 13, the 13th largest OMC in the country, to number 1 in 2025. Um, so that's the short version of the story. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
Yeah.
clarification and for sharing that. Now, when you joined and later were made CEO, you were becoming CEO at a very challenging point. What was going through your mind at that time? And what were the first things that you saw and said, look, if I'm going to try to fix this problem, I'm going to start from here.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit of that?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think I've been finance director for 6 years. So I had a very good understanding of the business. So I had a very good understanding of the business as finance director for 6 years. I think the main challenge for all the local OMCs in the industry, and for those who don't know, there are about 200 plus oil marketing companies in Ghana, different companies. Yes. The biggest challenge in the industry is the willingness to, approach management scientifically. So when I took over, my first thing was we know the problems that the industry faces and the pain points of our customers. So what do we do? Luckily, like I said, Mr. Kalaji's son, KK, is an IT person. He's a software guy. So we had started before even 2020, 2018, started working on a software project to block out a lot of loopholes and revenue leakages in the business. So that IT side was already happening before I took over. But I think I realized that culture was a big problem for us to succeed in the industry. You needed an environment where rules and expectations were clear. You needed leadership that was consistent in terms of following precedent. So if you do this in this case, you don't do something else when it's a family member. And most of our local businesses struggle with that because almost all the 200 OMCs are family type businesses. There are family people in the business and there are people who are from outside, and often the rules apply differently depending on who is involved. So when I took over, first thing was I sent a very clear CEO message on 1st September when I took over on what should be expected under my leadership. And one of them was that rules were going to be applied strictly. Whether you are a son of a shareholder, a daughter of a shareholder, if you are caught for anything whatsoever, you are going to face the same consequences like anybody else. The reason for that was because my frustration and initial resignation was because something like that was not being dealt with the way I expected it to be dealt with. So setting the tone, I think, is very critical from day one, because we live in an environment, and especially in a business community, where the rules are not really enforced. So people get away, and it becomes a toxic cycle of people trying to outdo each other. So that tone was very important. Setting the very tone and creating that expectation was key. Now, in terms of the pain points for customers, because we are going to be a business in the oil marketing space that has 200 competitors. If you want to stand out, you need to deal with customer issues. You need to make sure that the things that customers are concerned about, you are dealing with them. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I'll mention the three key things we identified. And this was through market research. We contracted a company called Cobalt. I don't know whether they are still around. And they did a detailed review for us. And this is very scientific. So I'm talking about how you deal with these things scientifically. So Cobalt did a market research for us. And they identified the fact that, yes, the vast majority of the Ghanaian Ghanaian fuel consumers wanted quality fuel, but they were very suspicious of the local oil marketing companies for many reasons, for many historical reasons. They were very suspicious. So while they wanted affordable fuels, they could see affordable fuel, but they were not willing to go and buy them. They were also very, very aware that oil marketing companies were fond of cheating their customers. So yes, they could display affordable fuels, but they were cutting corners by cheating you on the quantity. And then they also were concerned about price. So yes, give us good quality, make sure you're not cheating us with the quantity, but also give us at affordable prices. But the most important point was that when they had issues, there was nobody to speak to. The businesses were essentially disconnected. They had fuel at the station, but if you had issues, you have to deal with the guy at the station. And often the guy at the station is the problem, doesn't want to solve the problem, doesn't escalate it. So these four things became very critical for our change management process. And we will take that, I think, as we go along.
Wow.
In terms of what we did around each of these areas to achieve the double-digit growth rates that have moved us from number 13 to number 1 in 5 years. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I think he deserves a round of applause, even with what he's been sharing so far. Because I'm just wondering if we had a directors meeting and somebody suggested, going to consult or hire the services of a consultant to do market research.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of us will say, look, it's not important. We know what the customer wants. So already from day one, it sounds like you took a certain approach of not assuming and actually trying to get data to guide your decision making.
Yeah, it's very important to not assume. And as a business person, you normally have certain ideas. And if you go into the field doing the research yourself, you may bring the buyers into to bear, and sometimes even the way you ask the questions. So if you bring people who don't really have direct understanding of the business and they ask those questions with no prejudices or biases, you get to hear the actual story. Yeah.
Okay. I want to delve deep into your takeover because I mean Star Oil was existing about 16, 18 years prior to you joining. And here you were joining a business which was family owned with external shareholders and so on and so forth. You also probably had a management team that was there prior to your entry. Now, how did you manage that change management in terms of people having how things were being done in the past, and you even complaining that was one of the reasons for the resignation, and then having to come back, and then having to deal with that kind of a change? How did you manage that?
Yeah, it's a, it's definitely a challenge. But one of the things I didn't do, which I think my predecessor, who I took over from, and my predecessor lasted in the business for I think 1.5 years as finance director, and it was done. He was actually somebody who became my friend. We used to do consulting jobs together. He would get jobs and then we go and do it together. So he became my friend, but he didn't have the patience to deal with some of the issues. And I think it's very important to, when you enter a new environment, to be patient, to try and understand people from where they come from. Everybody has their own reason for behaving the way they do. Often we are in a hurry to change people quickly, and that level of patience is key. Communication is very, very important. I think that is something that I cannot overemphasize. In fact, my management team members say I tend to over communicate. Like we've heard this before. Why are you saying it over and over? It's because I think if you are a business leader and you want people to buy into your vision and where you're going to, you need to make sure that you don't assume they understand where you're going. People tend to think that, oh, but this one, they understand, they should understand. Why, what else can it be? I think it's better to err on the side of over communicating vision than to assume that people know it. So everything when I joined, it was about 6 or 7 member management team. I'll talk about when 2020 when I took over, I made it a 20-member management team. I'll talk about why that was important. But essentially, everything I brought up in management discussions, I wanted to make sure it's grounded in facts, data. So I'm very big on data because over time I've realized that often people make statements that when you look at the data, it doesn't support the statement. Meanwhile, on the face of it, it looks like this is very plausible and it's the right information. But just go beneath that and look at data, you find a different story. So one of the key changes we made in 2018, like when we started developing the software, the reason for that was because 2015, 1 year after I joined Star Oil, was when the MPA decided to do the price deregulation policy. Before then, we were all selling at the same prices. 2015 July, MPA decided that we could all compete on whatever price we wanted to. The first thing we did as a company was to look for evidence of how this changes the market in other countries. Fortunately for us, we found a Deloitte report on the UK market and how price deregulation affected the market between 1977 and 2011. So this Deloitte report was something we studied at our management meeting. And I made sure that we studied it because every solution I was going to propose, people needed to feel like this was grounded in real experience. Otherwise, they would think it's your opinion against theirs. So to come back to your question, I think communication was the key for me. Getting the rest of the team I came to meet to understand that these suggestions we are making or these solutions we are proposing are actually not just opinions, but they are backed by data. So if we are going to talk about who is winning the market, I'm pulling market share information and doing trend analysis for each of the OMCs and coming up with explanations. Sometimes I got them wrong because I came from consulting and I didn't know the industry well. There were a lot of cases like that, but at least you try to be grounded in data, yeah, and communicating your views based on data. Yeah.
So, Philip, listening to you, there's a lot of talk about data and scientific analysis and approaches towards solving the problems.
Yeah.
Now, but you also talk about communication.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find out how you got your team's buy-in, because in one line, the Ghanaian will say you are too book long. And then in the other line as well, well, you're using this information and you're saying you're communicating to them. But how did you get them to accept that communication and come along with you?
It's tough. I won't say it was easy. As I've already explained, it wasn't easy during that process. Things were slower than I would have expected in terms of change.
They didn't make noise for the back.
But one of the things I didn't do when I came into Star Oil was to suddenly begin to bring people from outside the team to join. And, like I could have gone for colleagues from PwC or other firms to try and come and fix, the system. I think that creates a we versus them type of environment. I've seen companies that have done that. And I think the book you gave me on Walmart, Sam was the type who was always going around and headhunting for the best talent and so on. There's a place for that. I think you need to be conscious of the environment you are in sometimes applying those principles. But what I did was to try to challenge the team. And luckily, there were a few young guys in there who had just come out of school who were very, very determined to make sure that this vision of us becoming the most efficient business in the industry. And one of the lacks, I would say a lack that we had was also having the majority shareholder's son being the IT guy. I keep saying it because our story may not have taken this turn if we didn't have a strong IT guy who was committed to this change. Because the software we developed to essentially revolutionize the way we do business was in-house developed. Essentially, I had the accounting background, he had the IT background. And because there were a lot of influences in terms of money and all kinds of things flowing around, if you have an IT guy who doesn't have a skin in the game and you are developing a software that is going to block all the loopholes, you are most certainly going to have a situation where the IT project always faces challenges and never takes off. So those are nuances that make you successful. And maybe in another environment, maybe I'll not have been successful because purely I couldn't have gotten the help I needed. Because the teamwork is not one person. If the guys don't come along, you are going to get frustrated at some point and want to leave.
Yeah.
But I think I would never, I will keep saying that letting people, building trust is very key. And I always talk about building trust in three ways. We always focus on building trust with our staff in particular, which is lead by example. I think I was already having a conversation here where I said, for us, for me as a leader in the oil marketing space, I can tell you for a fact that this journey to number one has been at a personal cost to me, personal in terms of sacrifices. I'm not the most richest in the industry. I have smaller OMC CEOs who are living bigger lifestyle than I do, right? But the reason is because you don't want your team to feel that you are driving efficiencies, especially around staff costs or cutting off all the loopholes. And yet the business leader is the one that is living the largest lifestyle. And in our industry, we find a lot of the families that are running OMCs are often caught in that web where they somehow take on too much responsibility, either in family, community, which is all good, but it should be within the budget of the company. And the moment you have staff cost under pressure, and yet the CEO is living the wildest, lifestyle in town, you are going to have issues with all the problems that leakages and so on, because the staff are there and they can see all that is going on. So if you are going to build trust with your staff and get them to buy in and trust the journey you are in, you will need to bear some sacrifices as the leader. You will need to deliberately um, operate in a way that makes them believe that our boss is with us. It's a personal sacrifice you need to come to, and I've gone through that as a personal sacrifice. Because if I don't, they will not trust me. They will think I preach something else and I do something else. And I think by doing that, the team has sort of, they feel like I'm a part of the team and I go through the same processes as they do. And what we are doing is goal oriented and achievement driven. And they are motivated by that. We've blocked all the loopholes that you can think of. In the oil marketing industry, the biggest losses that we face are fuel theft in the supply chain. We've turned that around to make it an income source. So drivers are supposed to actually bring overages to the station. Prince is in that business, so he knows what I'm talking about. But often in the OMC business, drivers bring shortages. When they come, they bring a shortage. The fuel is supposed to be 45,000 liters. They bring 44,900. 100 liters is disappeared. In our case, scientifically, they're supposed to bring 45,100 liters extra. They bring that. And that has become a revenue source rather than a cost point. And we reward them based on that behavior. The same with our attendants. So we block the loopholes, but we pass it on in terms of staff cost. So our staff cost is the biggest cost center on our P&L. It's a way of building trust that when you go on this journey with me, I'll give back to you what used to be gains for a few people. So depending on where you sit in the oil marketing industry, if you are a driver, you make a lot of money illicitly. If you are at the station, you could make a lot of money by doing all kinds of things. But if you can block those loopholes and make it a welfare system, everybody in the chain, whether you are closest to the money-making source or not, you get to be part of a bigger pie and everybody is happier. So I think that's how we've been able to build trust.
So two things. I'm going to ask two questions in one. The first one has to do with how you managed to create alignment between yourself and the major shareholder's son. That's one. And then I think that we need to give the listeners a bit of a breakdown in terms of what you've done with the overages and kind of rewarding staff for a certain behavior. So I think I'll give a bit of a background because some people may not really understand it. I'm in the industry, so
Okay.
I understand it. So what happens in the oil space is this: if Star Oil buys 45,000 liters of fuel, and the tanker is to deliver to Star Oil station. What happens is that the bulk distributor that Star Oil buys from, they would averagely give Star Oil, let's say, about 45,100 or 200 liters. So they top up about 100, 200 liters to cater for transit losses because fuel contracts and expands.
Temperature.
Now, what happens is that the drivers usually, or some drivers, see that top up as their fuel. And so on route delivery, what they do is they stop and siphon the fuel. Now, and I also entered the industry about 4 years ago, and I realized it's something that people do. But and a lot of companies just, I mean, try to surcharge their drivers with the losses, fire them. Some people have also taken it as normal. But what Star Oil has done is um, is to reward staff or drivers who bring the top up or the overage fuel to Star Oil. Now, the reason why I'm taking time to go through this is this. As leaders and as business people, sometimes we tend to think that, okay, the driver is to bring the 45,200 or 45,100 anyway. So why should I reward them for doing the right thing? But Star Oil has taken a different approach and has turned the bad behavior now into an income generator. So I want you to answer two questions. One, how did you get alignment with the one of the founders' son? Because I mean, we've had conversations and you've spoken very highly of him in terms of his support and building the software that has taken you this far. That's one. And then two, talk about what went into thinking that, look, let's reward drivers and turn this thing around from a loss to an income generator.
Thank you. I think so. The IT manager, KK, I think we had a very good relationship from the word go. I like to think that we are both introverts, so we tend to share a lot in common. Um, he's a very reasonable person, very reasonable person. Communication is key. I think he quite quickly realized that I meant quite well for the business, and that where we're going with the things we're developing, we're going to be very good for his father's company and his own future. But again, IT projects are such that you need to, just like the way we handle the overage, I made it more or less. I asked him to set up a company, so he becomes the developer and everything. So he provides that service to us instead of going outside to secure it. So I've more or less allowed him to be entrepreneurial within that context. It went on to, it's a way of motivating, because there are certain types of jobs that if you don't introduce that element, it really doesn't it doesn't go far. Software development is one of those. So since then, he's done a lot of upgrades, a lot of changes that have benefited the company, but it all sits within the company. So it's in terms of security, it's even better. On the driver's side, yes, we started with trying to use enforcement and we did everything. But as you know, in the industry, um, there's a certain very bad culture among tanker drivers, and it's very endemic. And there are people who have been in this game for a very long time. We've tried every option under the sun. But one of the things we did, which I think pointed us to the right direction, was we saw a colleague, OMC, Zen Petroleum. We learned from them when it came to their employment of the ladybirds, the women drivers. So they have a mining business, big mining business that they supply to in the Western region. They employed women as their tanker drivers for the mines. So we call them Lady Bear. So we learned from them and realized that the ladies were much better in terms of honesty and integrity around fuel than the men. Because the men have been in that game for a very long time. And, and, and it was very, very difficult to change them. And so we, again, scientific management, as I always talk about. So we brought in the ladies, we employed, some of them came from Zen, some came from Metromass. And what we did was to use them as a benchmark to try and discover what we were losing. So we gave them a specific job to do. They came in, they take the fuel from the depot to the station, and we tracked them, and we looked at the overage that they were delivering. And we did this over time and realized that for every liter, that for every consignment that is delivered to the station, at least we were supposed to get 0.5% as overage. So if we brought 45,000 liters, 0.5% of that should come in as overage. Luckily for us, the NPA at the time had developed what we call the temperature compensation guidelines. We took a copy of that document, looked at the temperature compensation chart they had developed, and we programmed this into our software. So when the driver gets to the station, the software does the calculation for them automatically. So every one of our drivers has a thermometer, and the station managers also have thermometers, scientific. So when you get to the station, you do a dipping with your thermometer, look at the temperature, and once it's entered into the software, it does the calculation of how much overage you're entitled to. Again, we couldn't have implemented the overage system without an IT platform. If it was a manual system, there was no way it was going to be successful. You needed something that, because every month, currently we do about 2,200 unique trips out of the depot into our stations. And each of these 2,200 deliveries to our 254 stations, if you're going to track them manually, it was impossible. In fact, that's one of the reasons why this has become a competitive advantage for us, because our software has all the drivers' names before even they reach the station. If you're a new driver, before you get to the station, your name is in the software. The station manager receives your product through the software. It's not a manual process. So this is done in a way that at a click, we're able to run a report to tell each driver's performance on average versus their deliveries. If you are not meeting the guidelines, we'll sack you. It's that straightforward. We've had to sack a lot of drivers over the 5-year period to essentially get a certain group of drivers who are committed to this. And because of that, something that used to be a loss in our P&L, I think at the moment, on top of my head, we get about a net of about 5 million cedis from overage every month.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And what we did also, the reason we did this overage project was because we also saw a connection with quality of the fuel. So in Ghana, when we talk about quality of fuels, everybody's attention goes to, these people have additives, these people don't have additives. But to be honest with you, when it comes to quality control in the fuel downstream sector, the driver is more important than any additive you add to the fuel. The station operators, the guys at the station, are more important than any additive you add to the fuel. So what we did was to make sure that the supply chain was that robust, that whatever you take from the depot and you bring to the station is the product. It didn't go to any place to do adulteration or to siphon fuels. Because if a driver doesn't even do adulteration, and some of them do, some of them, when they find themselves in those yards where they go and siphon, they also take on inferior products. If they don't want you to detect that they've done anything like that, they will also go and fetch inferior products. So if you don't motivate them well, you are under risk of your fuel being adulterated. It has nothing to do with the OMC. It's just the supply chain system we have in the country. So we also realized that the overage had a direct relationship between cheating of customers. So if a driver steals a fuel and brings a shortage to the station, and that station doesn't find it because the underground tank's calibration, this is technical, but every station's underground tank is also calibrated, just like the fuel tanker's capacity is also calibrated. If you bring 45,000 liters to the station and you siphon 100 liters, and the station's calibration is not done to a very high, precision, the station manager may not find the 100 liters has been stolen. Now they sell and they make a loss underground before they realize that no, maybe the driver actually stole some of the fuel. Their solution in most cases is to cheat the customer to recover the loss. So we realized there was a very direct relationship between making sure the drivers are bringing the overage. And so the overage portion, a portion of the overage is actually reserved for the station. So we call that the station share of the temperature compensation. So that portion is deducted and is kept for the station to make sure that they have no reason to cheat a customer on the levels. So when you solve that problem, you're not just solving quality, you're also potentially solving the issue of quantity, customers getting cheated. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the importance of technology.
Technology. Yeah.
You shared, because I had a question coming up, but I think even from get-go, you've been hitting on the power of technology.
Yeah.
And the amazing part about your story is that you've actually tried to share the same technology with your competitors, from
Yeah.
what I understand.
Yeah.
But I want to move away from a lot of the technicalities and then come down to something quite tactical and quite human, and problems that we can all relate with. Now, you took over at a point where there were a lot of challenges, and every business leader here probably has faced a challenge where they had creditors on their necks and payables and cash flow issues.
Yeah.
And you've been able to manage that in a very skillful manner.
Yeah.
And I want you to share how, because at that point in terms of crisis, there's a lot of pressure. First of all, what's the mindset in terms of managing the crisis? And then two, how did you manage these stakeholders where now a lot of them are giving you credit that you're not even asking for?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's true. Obviously, I took over in 2020 when every business was one way or the other in a crisis because of the sudden, the fuel industry was not spared. Fuel prices dropped sharply to a point where, and then demand also collapsed. So not just price, but demand was also very
Nobody's
low.
moving.
So it was a big stress test for all of us in the industry. I think building trust, again, not just building trust with your staff, building trust with your bankers and suppliers is very important. You give them your word that I'm going to stick to this plan, you must stick to the plan. I think all too often I find that people try to explain it away, oh, this happened. So what we did with Star Oil, and people, when we were growing, people were making comments, oh, Star Oil, they've gotten investors from Dubai, they've gotten I can tell you without any, Star Oil has never gotten a PESWA from any investor from the time I entered up to now. Wow. Our growth has been essentially a blank check that has been given to us by our partners because they realized that we're sticking to our promise. I'll give you an example. At the moment, the reason most of our colleagues, local oil marketing companies, are not able to grow is not because they don't want to grow. Growth must be funded. Your supplier or your bank is the only source of funding that growth. Except you are making so much profit, you can essentially generate enough to fund the growth. But if you're dealing with an industry like ours where margins are very tight and you have been blocked loopholes to make sure you are very profitable, your growth can only be funded by trust from your suppliers and your bankers. So what we did was to make sure that for our suppliers, if we promise 30 days, 30 days. Whatever we do to make sure we pay you, we pay you. So we built this track record over, we were in a very bad place at some point, very, very bad place, where essentially when I go to the office in the morning and I ask the treasurer for a position on our banks and how much checks we've issued out, the bank balances were already negative to the limit. And yet we had like 60 million cedis that were going to come in that day. That's where we've come from. And then we've been able to, obviously with the changes that we did,
Philip,
profitability
just to
improved.
clarify,
Yeah.
you have like 60 million coming in as clearing checks,
As clearing checks
not
that
as
we've
inflows.
given out. So that day, you have to come out with all kinds of, so dual confirmation or receipt. Some of you in business should have seen that. So the banks kept dual confirmation not received, sometimes 3 times before the oldest checks will go through, then the next ones will join the queue that way. So, so through the obviously we're improving profitability through some of the systems we had deployed and loopholes that we had blocked. So the business was gradually becoming profitable. But if you want, I mean, the way Star Oil became number one because our suppliers and bankers were willing to fund that process. That's the point I'm trying to make. We had no limit in terms of our credit level. We sell to all kinds of business transporters. Prince is a transporter, so he knows some of them will pay 30 days, 45 days. We supply a big factory like Casablanca, all their fuel and LPG, we supply that. And they will take sometimes 60 days to pay you. So you need to fund, you need to have some real working capital line. Every step of our growth, today we sell 80 million liters a month. If you multiply 80 million liters a month by roughly 10 cities as the price, it tells you how much credit line. So if you multiply 80 million liters a month by an average pump price at a station, which is about 11 cedis or between 10 and 12, so 11 cedis, you are getting 800 and something million Ghana cedi as your credit line that you must have if you are going to play at that level. The reason a lot of our smaller players are not able to grow is because the creditors have decided that they will not advance any credit. In fact, majority of the 200 OMCs, locally owned OMCs that are in the country, essentially buy their products on cash basis because they've always not, delivered on their promise. In fact, I had the misfortune of essentially speaking for one of them, who we all started with actually from day one, I mean, in the 1990s. And I can tell you, after they were supplied the very first consignment, when the time was due, they were not picking their calls. In fact, I had to call the supplier and tell the supplier that, look, I'm paying for it, just put it on their account. Don't let them know, just keep chasing when they get the refund to me. That's what happened. And we've had very bad experiences with credits, even to businesses, our own, clients and so on. So I think if you don't deliver on your promise to especially your suppliers and your financiers, what you are doing is potentially putting a big, big, big stress on your ability to grow, because working capital is what you need to grow your business. And if you want cheap working capital, you can't get it anywhere than from your suppliers line. So we have such a huge credit line. In fact, there's no limit to it. The only limit is how fast we can grow. That's where we are. There's no limit to how much limit the suppliers are giving to us. And our industry is such that there are only a few big players who supply the market. In Ghana, the biggest fuel importers, or what we call the OTCs or IOTCs, are British Petroleum, BP, Glencore, Trafigura, and Vitol. They are the biggest importers into Ghana before the BDCs take from them. If they tell BDCs that we don't want you to supply Star Oil because their credit risk profile is very poor, that's the end of Star Oil, because essentially our growth curtails. And that's what has happened to a lot of our compatriots. Keep to your word, especially with your suppliers and bankers. If you can't, come up with always engagement. We did that a few times in the past, especially during COVID, where we had to go for meetings with them, explain to them, give them a plan, stick to the plan. The phenomenon of not picking your calls when your supplier is calling you because you can't pay, I think is a big, big red flag.
Yeah.
I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, you have. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now I want to go to another tactical issue that has to do with dealing with people and through this change management. Now, how are you able to protect the company from um, internal sabotage? I mean, you came in as a new leader. Did you ever face days where you felt like, oh, this vision we're trying to drive, there were people who are undermining the vision, and how did you manage to overcome that?
Oh yeah, we had plenty of that. I mean, a lot of that. Because in the oil marketing space, I'll give you an example that will give you context into how rotten the oil marketing space is, right? Um, a lot of the reasons you have 200 OMCs in the market is because most of them have a history of either being tanker drivers or being station managers for their own OMCs, right? So they do all kinds of deals in the chain and they set up their own OMC. They set up their own transport, all kinds of problems. And so there's always somebody trying to drill holes in the boat. And that experience, we had a lot of it. What we did, we had in our own peculiar situation, we had a model that had regional managers across the country. And these regional managers were essentially riding on the back of their roles in the regions, actually to build their own businesses.
Wow.
And they were coming up with, at the time, every month, they were sending all kinds of spending they've done already in advance. So you're just supposed to, just record it. So I liken our industry is not very different from banks. That's the mentality I brought to the industry. Maybe it was because in my days in PwC, my work was mostly in the financial services sector. So I could really connect the difference between a bank and an OMC is that a bank is handling cash. OMC handles stock that is easily converted into cash. So it's just one step and you have cash. So we always have a lot of cash at our stations. And you can imagine how attractive this is to anybody who wants to um, defraud a company or anything like that. So we did that, but again, like I said, we set a very strong tone. We've had several people who have been sacked during this journey, several. And I was telling your colleague that some of them still remain my friends because the way I explained to you why you have been sacked is such that you continue to be my friends. And to be honest with you, some of them have gone on to find job for them elsewhere on condition that they will not repeat that. But you can't be in style because it would it would it will create a toxic, it will make the tone inconsistent. So yes, you are my friend. And I've also noticed that often the red flags start early. People who want to do that, they tend to want to connect with you as CEO in a way that sends a message to others that look, I'm very good, I'm very cool with the CEO. So know where your boundaries are, that kind of thing. They use those things to send messages to their colleagues. So when you have such a person fall into such a situation, you don't want to confirm the expectation that, oh, for this guy is untouchable. You follow the same principles and you let the person go. So we've had to sack a lot of people. In fact, last year, when we did a review of our third party dealer transporters, 40 of them were sacked. 40 of the truck drivers, they were sacked. And you know why the union didn't go on strike? Because the tanker drivers union leadership has come to understand our model and endorses it because they feel that it's the best model for their drivers. So when you are sacked within style, no tanker driver union leadership comes to us. They don't. We sacked 40, and I was expecting that the union will come at me. Nobody showed up. But because of that, the overage rates within that cohort of dealer transporters went up. So yes, we had a lot of those situations, but we are not shy at all to crack the whip, sack people, and even be friends with them later on outside of the company. Yeah. Because that's the standard. Yeah. I have no power to bend the rules. And that's the message I keep sending to the rest of them. So setting the right tone and living by it, I think is very, very important. Setting the right tone and living by it. Don't give excuses. In PwC, we had something we call rationalization. Don't rationalize. Every situation, oh, this is an exception. This is why this one must be given a different treatment. No. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I think for our session, we seem to be running out of time, but I'm going to ask one more question, and then we allow the audience to ask whatever questions they have to ask. Through your journey, I'll ask you this. What kind of leader does a transformation require?
That's a difficult one for me. I haven't really thought about it, but I think it has to be a leader that has a lot of empathy, at the same time very strict. A leader, because you are working with people. I think you need to be very open-minded, be a very good listener, because that's the only way you are able to pick up on all the. You don't have to have a mindset of I know it all. You have to, get information from the bottom up, and then, also share your views. But I think every time the why is important. I don't allow the why to be lost in whatever I do. Everything I'm communicating, I'm explaining the why. The why is what people now, So in Starwell, I'm on the platform. I'm on several platforms. I'm on the same platform with all the truck drivers, all the pump attendants, and we have 2,200 of the pump attendants. And they are staff. They are on our payroll. They are staff. We have 2,700 workers. None of them is outside of those platforms, in various different platforms, but I'm on all those platforms. I don't really get too many, you know, people think, oh, when you're a CEO and you are on all these platforms, maybe they will not talk. But if you come onto our pump attendant platform, you'll be shocked. They are very vocal, they share their views because I encourage it. I encourage it a lot. So yes, you have to have I think empathy is very important, but at the same time, even when you are sacking somebody, you need to explain to them. So I'm that type of person. I'm sacking you, but you are sitting in front of me and I'm taking you through in a very nice way. And I'm trying to give you hope about how I can help you outside of the system because I think there's a mistake you made, that sort of thing. So you go and still my friend. And because of that, I get a lot of information flow. Um, I'm not outside of the company at all. So yeah, there are pros and cons to it, but I tend to be very much in tune with everything that's going on in the company from all the various staff groups to the point that all of them appoint me as their patron. So the tanker drivers appoint me as their patron because they think I'm their chief welfare officer. The station managers also. That's how you should be. You shouldn't be when you are coming, people are running away. In fact, there was a statement I made recently to some of the management team members where people come to me with certain issues and I'm caught in the web of how do I handle this? If I talk about it, maybe the manager will think, this subordinate has reported. If you also don't deal with it, then the subordinate feels when you even go to CEO, he doesn't deal with your issue. So how do you maneuver in that? And I was telling the management team members that I take the view that if staff, and I know that there's a risk that some staff just want to do that to have relationship with the CEO. So I'm mindful of that. But if a lot of staff find it easy to come to CEO to have a discussion and get solutions, and they are not coming to you, the manager, you have only one option. In fact, if you try to antagonize that staff, you will get the wrong results. The best you can do is to try and build trust with the staff such that the reports come to you. So the fact that a lot of the team members will rather want to, if they find a CEO to be more open than a manager, is something we have to work on. That's the message I always tell the management team members. If the people are not walking into your office to have a discussion with you and they are rather afraid of you, then you are going to miss the change. You can't do any change where the team members are afraid of you. They need to be open, very, very open with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip.
The first question on where we see ourselves in 5 years. The industry is a very competitive one. Um, I think if you look at all at least the top four OMCs in Ghana, Star Oil, followed by Goral, followed by Shell, and then Total, and maybe Zen sometimes as the third or fourth. They switch between. These are all these OMCs have at one point been number one before in Ghana. So this is we just became number one last year. So it's early days yet. We have to work a lot harder to consolidate that leadership. Already that has culminated into a price war that we are currently fighting it out. So it's an interesting 5 year ahead of us, but we have very clear plans. This year we are getting our own BDC license because we are the largest, and there are a lot of economies of scale that we can get from being having our own BDC license to be able to import our products directly. We also have our own plan of buying a tank farm this year. We're already in conversations with that, so that we are not just importing the product, we're also storing in our own tank farm and making sure we have control over the supply chain. We're already the largest transporter of fuel products in Ghana in terms of truck ownership. I think maybe sometimes JK Hogley may be the next, or sometimes be Satway, but we have so many trucks that it makes us, at least in terms of the most utilized trucks in the country, we are the most. So we are integrated throughout, and we intend to finish that integration in the course of this year, maybe the next. We think that, again, the industry is one that is going to experience, the transition. So our industry is in transition, as you all know. EVs are coming, and we are monitoring that space very well. We've started partnerships to deploy charging stations, charging points at our stations. So that's ongoing. But I think for us as a business, when we look at what has happened in the UK, and remember I mentioned our research of the UK market post deregulation of prices, we see that the hypermarket chains are doing the best. They are doing better than the traditional oil marketing companies in the UK. So if we develop expertise in the retail side of the business, not just fuel, but retail side of the business, as in the shops, we can scale up and become maybe a better competitor than, say, Melcom or any of the others you have in it. So we are currently working on that as a plan for the long term, because fuel at some point will not be something you can count on, and it's one of the fears that you realize that every OMC must think about. So yes, ultimately we think venturing into pure retail when fuel gradually becomes a thing of the past is something that every OMC has to think about. And there are ways to utilize our filling station assets when fuel no longer exists. So things like, we're already a transporter, we have knowledge about transportation. We can venture into uh, bus transit systems if the environment is conducive. We can go into last mile deliveries because we have several locations around the country, and we have transportation business to be able to facilitate that. So all those are on the table, and we are thinking through each of them. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much. I mean, already that thing you talk about,
Yeah.
the fuel stations turning into retail points is happening.
Yeah.
And we're going into meetings, even on advertising and marketing
Yeah.
side, where
Yeah.
petrol forecourts are becoming a key part
Sure.
of the uh, key accounts or
Yeah.
retail space. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's happening.
it's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
All right, I'll come to you.
I haven't responded to my greatest fear.
Yeah.
My majority shareholder and former CEO, when we became number one, his advice to me was that, Philip, you are now riding what's the word? Is it a buffalo or something? And that at this point, if you jump off, it will kill you. So I'm not that free at all.
What are the threats?
I think it was I guess it was meant to be a threat, or I don't know. But when you do what we've done in the last 5 years, I think it brings a bit of a pressure on you. And the real fear is, can you sustain this? Will the team get complacent? Um, how do you ensure that you still remain grounded and deliver as you've done in the past? So these are real fears that we have, and we'll try and live up to the expectation. Yeah. on the issue of differentiation. So our business, so I think for most students of strategy, in any business environment, you can decide to compete as a low cost leader or from a differentiation strategy. So you look for something that you can use to differentiate, or you play in a niche market. When we started our this journey, we knew that there were multinational players, right? There were multinational players who you can find in every country you go in the world. Our view was that as a local player, if we're going to be able to compete, especially because we could price lower, then we should go with the cost leadership as our main strategic goal. So that's what we chose. But that requires that you are very, very, in terms of operational excellence, should be top notch. So that's what we focused on. Yes, in the beginning, when we developed the software, we saw the efficiencies that it was giving us. Some of our partner OMCs, I mean, our colleagues in the industry, reached out to us and we're willing to give it to them. So we gave it to about four of them. Unfortunately, the results have been very, I mean, to put it mildly, it didn't go anywhere. So it tells you the learning point in that is that technology by itself doesn't create results. It takes people. So the people are more important than the technology. Technology is just an enabler. So if you develop, if you can have two companies, same technology, same software, etc., but the leadership makes the difference. The people make the difference. So our experience is that those OMCs didn't use it for anything because the system blocks so many loopholes that unfortunately the leadership in most of our OMCs want those loopholes to exist. And this is real. I mean, I can tell you so many case studies that I've gone through with some of these OMCs. Some of them, I'll just give you one example. Whenever there's a price change, upwards price change, right, then we call it a windfall. So you have stock at a station and the price goes up. Some of these leaders, rather than treating it as a P&L item, they will send boys to the station to go and take the windfall money for them because essentially it's free money. Now, when you do that, you are creating a cycle where, rule breaking and all these things continue. So the system we have will not allow that to happen because the system already calculates the windfall that the company has generated because prices have gone up. The system knows the stock at the beginning when prices changed, and that's the calculation. And somebody's job is just to debit the station and credit the P&L for the company. So you can't just go and take that money. But these guys want that loophole to exist so they can make money off the line, and that so many other things doesn't work because of that. So yes, we are focused on operational excellence as our strategic objective because we think that is what will win us the market. And so far, I think the evidence is quite clear. In terms of the issue of political pressure, I think my answer to that is that it's not as bad as maybe you would think. Maybe it's also because I'm generally not available. I don't make myself available too much. I live mostly, I work from home 5 days of the week. I live around Safari Valley, so I'm not in Accra most of the time. And I can count the number of politicians I know. I wouldn't attend parties, I wouldn't do, so I tend not to be available. And I haven't had any threats or anything like that. I think we started growing during the MPP era in 2021, 2022. Never experienced any threats. During this NDC era, I've not had, I've been very vocal, but I haven't received any threat at all. I think most people are genuinely happy for what has happened with Star Oil. So even when they are conflicted, they understand that, look, this is something that we need to support in one way or the other. So maybe that's why we've sort of been shouldered a bit. Yeah, but so far I haven't had any such threats at all. I feel free to, speak about things that I think is beneficial to Star Oil, but not everything. There are things that if I talk about it, be explosive, and I I try not to go into them. I'd rather take them back end rather than on social media. Yeah.
Culture, offsite,
Yeah.
onsite.
Yeah. So like I said, if you want, for us, the the customer-facing teams are our most valuable asset, I think, because these are the guys who are the face of the company. That's why I said I'm on the same platforms with them. In fact, I run Zoom trainings for the attendants myself sometimes on quarterly basis, where essentially I'm on a Zoom call with zones and we discuss the policies. I take 10 to sometimes I've been on 4 hour. I'm working from home. I have a lot of time. We have a 20-man management team. They do everything. I basically don't do much these days. But my time is meant to be dealing with tone and culture and things like that. So you will find that sometimes I'm on a 4 hour call with my pump attendants around the country, and they are free to ask questions and make suggestions. We laugh over things. So they understand the mindset. And we discuss sometimes on our WhatsApp platform that we use for communications. We discuss all these, issues confronting them, why you should do this, why you not do. Sometimes some of them are funny things, and I'm part of the conversation. So they are really at ease. But the communication gets the message across that this is what CEO expects us to be doing. This is how we should treat customers and so on. So culture, I think, again, communication is very key if you want to change culture. But you also have to recognize that there are positives to every culture. Sometimes it's more about understanding why. Understanding the why is important. So I grew up all my life in Ghana. I tend to tell my wife that, Charlie, I understand this culture more than you do also. My wife. So yeah, culture is important in terms of management. And we have a few rough edges here as far as that is concerned. One of the things that I've seen happen often is I come into the office, people want to come and take my bag. I tell them, look, I'm not that kind of person. I don't want this culture in the company. I don't want big man culture. So, I mean, I carry my own bag upstairs. I don't want that kind of environment. When you see me, you can come, we have a conversation. So there are things, basic things, but it sends a certain message of how I think and how I want my team members to. So that direct engagement is very important. I travel across the country to visit the stations from time to time and to interact with the attendants. When I'm there, they are happy. We engage, and that I think also sends the style to them. Because if you can get a same management style to your station managers who are very critical in the chain, they also pass on that same style. So some attendants can reach out to me, say, oh, this thing that you did, I think our manager has not learned it, or maybe you have to, you have to. I say, oh no, he will learn. He has learned it, but it's a very delicate thing, because sometimes people want to play each other. So you have to make sure you don't walk into a minefield where you are being used to. But I think building that environment where people are free to talk, and then you communicate frequently is a way to influence culture. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Then the final question here was about
Comac.
Comac and beef and price floors.
Yes. So I until we suspended our membership, I was the vice chairman of Comac, and the price floor issue, I think it came up 2024. I was on record at our GIPCON conference where I expressed the same view that I'm against price floors in the gasoline markets, basically partly because of enforcement. So there are 200 players with about 5,000 filling stations across the country. The fact is that MPA is unable to enforce the price floor. So what happens is that we tend to have stations that are competing with other players who are not that visible, and they breach the price floor willingly, and nobody does anything about it. So the price floor for this window is 10.24 for gasoline, and I can't go below 10.24. But I will have a station somewhere in the country, and there's another small player there who is busily pricing at 10 cities. And you send the evidence, timestamp, everything, nothing gets done. The MP will tell you that, oh, they are doing something about it. There won't be 100% compliance and so on and so forth. So that's always been the story. The other reason is also because our markets are very trade sensitive. So when they introduce the price floor, they introduce it at the BDC level and they introduce it at the OMC level. the BDCs eventually, in fact, the BDCs were the ones who lobbied for the price floor to be introduced. And then they quickly realized that, no, this was a bad idea. Because Ghana's market, I told you there are about 4 main importers into Ghana, the IOTCs, BP, Trafigura, etc. They bring the product in tank mostly, and they allow people to buy on spot basis. So if today the world market price has dropped, or somehow the CD has appreciated sharply, which these days we tend to see. Even yesterday, we saw a sharp decline in appreciation of the CD. When those conditions happen, and you've set a price floor for a certain 2-week period, it means a player who is buying at the much reduced prices is not unable to pass it on to the consumers. He has to wait for 2 weeks. And sometimes that opportunity is lost. By the time the 2 week is over, prices have risen and they are not able to pass it on again. So it's purely on the basis of the compliance and also how the trading realities are for us. That's why I kicked against it openly, both last in 2024 when it was introduced and now. We wouldn't have left Comac if they were objective with the facts and try to communicate our view. But for some reason, the mindset and the view that was being put out there was that Star Oil is interested in this price floor being removed. I've even heard people saying that it's because we bring inferior products from outside of the country and we want to dump it and all kinds of things. We don't bring any products into Ghana by ourselves. In fact, most of our products is supplied by British Petroleum, you know, and all these big importers. We've never brought 1 liter into the country. All our products are imported on our behalf by the BDCs. So we wanted that objective view to be put out there rather than this conversation becoming about some people who want to sell inferior products. So when we realized that that was how the conversation was going, we said, no, look, we don't want to be part of a group that essentially doesn't want to tell the customers the truth about the trading dynamics and the realities of how people don't comply with the price floor. And so until you do something about it, we are out of the group. Subsequently, there were meetings that have been held. I think today there was a meeting that was held trying to see if they can do something about it. So we've told them that, well, between them and the MPA, if they can do something about it, we are willing to reconsider our decision. But we want to see something done about it, and then before we reconsider our decision. To be honest with you, I can't say our success is entirely our doing 100%. We've tried to do some things right, and sometimes we've been fortunate with the results. If we attempted to replicate this in another African country, I can't guarantee that we would achieve the same results we've been able to achieve with what we've done in Ghana. We've thought about it as one of the potential options, but it's not been easy. We know Zen, for example, tried to go into Mali with their mining supplies, and it was even for just commercial mining supply, it was not easy, and they had to pull out. So yes, it's possible in theory that this can be replicated with the systems, but the people are different teams. The moment you start bringing Ghanaian workers into another environment, then the issue of team confidence and the we versus them aspect of it, they come in and all that. So yes, it's possible to replicate with the system side. The people side might be more difficult because I'm a Ghanaian, I understand the Ghanaian culture and how people, accept these things, but maybe not so much with another African country. But we would hope that this can be replicated. The other question was on who influenced my leadership style. I wouldn't say my style, I learned it from any book or leadership book or reading certain books. I think what I've noticed is that on hindsight, one of the things our management team does is that every year during our annual retreat, we come up with books that we read together as a management team. So we discuss at the strategy session. So we've read a few books over the years at the strategy in the course of the 5 years. It's become a practice where we read, books ahead and then we go and discuss. And often we find that what we are doing is confirmed by what we've read. So I think it's giving us a bit more confidence over time rather than the opposite, that we learned it from a book and we are replicating it. Yeah. But in terms of books, I think I would highly encourage it. These days, I like the business case stories and so on that are coming up on my. Prince was good enough to give me one by Walmart, Sam Walton. And before that, I'd read a Tony Blair on leadership, which was good from a political angle, but could apply to corporate environment. I think we've done the Good to Great, which was also very interesting. I've done the Lee Kuan Yew one, political, but again, it's systems driven, so it gives you some insight. So there are a number of books like that that we've gone through as a management team. And the discussions, I think it gives the management team confidence that we're on the right path. And that's something I think is very important, that the managers realize that, oh, what we are doing, actually, some people have done it before. And so we must be right, that this achieves the right results. So sometimes we've had real cases where there are disagreements in terms of the style or the direction. And then you read a book and there's somebody is talking about it, that they did it, and that is what has helped them. Then managers realize, okay, then this was not something that we should worry about. It's a style that works. I think the current generation, by their nature, like open and transparent leadership, right? They like leadership that is very open and very approachable. They don't like the very formal type of leadership style. That's what I think I've noticed. And they like a very social environment for work. One of the challenges we have at the moment is because post 2020, we decided to do a work from home policy. So it's one of the areas that we are beginning to think about how to, especially new workers coming in who were not part of the existing teams, how you integrate them into the team. Because we currently do work from home exclusively for all our back office teams, because of all the systems are online. So apart from the station workers, the truck drivers, and maybe technicians, etc., everybody who is in back office works from home, and they are not required to ever show up in the office. Yeah, and it's working very well. So again, because the current generation is very tech savvy, I think they like to work at their own pace. They are they don't like to be constantly under supervision. I think you give them the challenge and you you give them the expectation that I'm expecting results. Whether you're doing it at midnight and you went for a party in the that's your own. But I want you to deliver. It's not always perfect. I think especially with the new people joining, being able to have that interaction and hold their hands and has been the biggest challenge for us. The only way is the frequent, at least I'm in the office twice a week. So when I come in, I try to make sure at least I interact, talk to a few of them, have an open door approach. And I think I like to think I'm very approachable in that sense, because I get most of the new guys, they're able to walk in, we discuss sometimes even strategy. Some of them will come up with a strategy conversation and we are discussing and I'm explaining why we are this, but I understand where you are coming from. I think I need to pay. Even if I think you are wrong, I'll say, oh yeah, I think I need to look at this area well, just to build confidence. Yeah, but I think if you want to get the best out of them, you need to allow for the social, less formal environment, and approachable, transparent, always communicating type of environment. Yeah. In 2020, my setup, we moved from there about 7. I mean, to the credit of my my board chairman, who is ex-CEO, when he was leaving, he decided to go with all the old guys that were in his group. I think his logic was that he wanted me to have a certain space that I didn't have to worry about, the older guys in the system. So he forced everybody to retire at that point, except for 2 of them who were in finance, who were in my team as, I was the finance director. I'd worked with them. They were, interestingly, they were right from day one. They were part of the, incorporation of the company. But it tells you that you can find very good people. The treasurer was with Star till he retired. Unfortunately, passed at the beginning of this year. The current finance director was there from beginning. He was my chief accountant when I was finance director, and I handed over to him. So yes, sometimes personality, but we didn't have too many of the old guard in the new team. And we tried to broaden the team in such a way that in the beginning it was a risk because having a 20-man management team was a big risk because we were smaller at the time. But I think our focus on operational excellence required that we paid attention to a lot of detail. And I couldn't do that by myself or with a very small team. So we had a team that everybody was focused on a specific area of the business to bring the kind of efficiency that we were driving. And as we've grown to the size that we are benefiting from that economy, the economies of scale. Yeah, but it was a risk in the beginning.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's proper that we give Philip a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.